welcome. Well, or almost welcome. Welcome to CMO Huddles Studio, the live streaming show dedicated to inspiring B2B greatness. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, live from my home studio in New York City. And I have a confession. I suffer from bright, shiny tech syndrome, particularly when it comes to AI tools. I hear about a new one and I rush. I got to download it on my computer, get it onto my phone. I'm like a sumo wrestler at an all-you-can-eat sushi bar. Inevitably, I never learn to use one of, I'll have 10 and I'll never learn all of them to their full capacity. And I'm unable to merge most of them into my work habits. So I might be a metaphor for MarTech buyers across the board. It could happen. We've had a lot of conversations about way too much tech, but let's find out and explore it with some folks that are really making these purchase decisions. And so helping you get the most out of your MarTech stack. With that, let's bring on Kathie Johnson, CMO of Sitecore, and a returning guest who previously appeared on the show to discuss pipeline playbooks and structuring marketing departments. Hello, Kathie. How are you and where are you this fine day?
Hi, Drew. So great to be back. Thank you for inviting me. I am outside of San Francisco today.
All right. Well, we've got East Coast and West Coast covered, so that's cool. So let's talk about your overall approach. I mean, it's a big topic, but managing, optimizing for your approach at Sitecore.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the overall approach to managing MarTech is so critical for every CMO, right? It's one of the first things I do when I join an organization. I joined Sitecore about 14 months ago, and it's something I look at over and over again, Drew, right? It's like the first thing I always do is build that visual map of all of the MarTech that we have. I really like to have that big picture understanding. And how does it tie to my strategy? Right? I think, Drew, every CMO would tell you, make sure your MarTech stack ties to your strategy. And I really want to identify where we are, where do we need to go? And there are 4 key questions I always ask. Like, do I have the right core? Right? What are those critical elements tied to my company's strategy? And for me, I always start at that center of that experience, which is our website. That's our digital front door. And so I evaluate CMSs, and then I look at all the other essentials around it. The second thing I look at is my MarTech stack complete? Does it align to my strategy? Are there gaps that I have that I need to consider? Do we have duplication, right? That is such a great way to streamline if you have duplication. The third thing is connected. Really, what is that data flow that you have and that data access that you have? Looking at that visual map, how is it tied to your website? How is it tied to your CRM? What's integrated? What should still be integrated that you haven't integrated? And the last thing, and you fed into this a little bit, like, is it current? Is it scalable? Does it have AI that I should be leveraging? Does it have AI that I shouldn't be leveraging? Right? But ensuring that I have a stack that can scale with me in the company. So that's a lot, Drew.
It is. And let's unpack it sort of. Let's go through some of those pieces so that it's a great overview. And I love it. So core.
Yes.
And you put the website at the core. I don't know if everybody puts the website at the core, but maybe they do. Is there anything else that you see at the core?
Yeah, so it depends if you're looking, I really look at it from a sales and marketing perspective. So that CRM and that CMS for me are super core, right? And the reason why I put the CMS at my core is I'm thinking about, as a marketer, like I love when Gartner stated this at their event last year, that the one thing marketers can uniquely own that nobody else can own is their differentiation, right? And so that's the storytelling, the messaging, but that's also the delivery of that content and messaging, which is why for me the CMS is so core, because that is where you are serving up all the core content of differentiation to individuals. But yes, if you're going to look at it fully, like the CRM is absolutely also core.
So, all right. So we've got CRM and CMS, and I'll link CMS. I totally buy in. That is your window to the world. And yes,
absolutely.
we need to differentiate it. So now Sitecore is a CMS company.
Yeah, not just CMS, but
Not just
yes, it's everything from content strategy all the way
so
through to publishing
in
and
I'm
content.
guessing that
Yeah.
your CMS is Sitecore.
Drew, you're so
I know,
smart.
it's unbelievable, isn't it? It's like it's a Friday and I am on it. So you probably didn't have a choice there, but let's just talk about that. And if you're another CMO and you're looking at it and you're looking at your CMS, and you because this is not the only CMS you've worked with, what were sort of what criteria would you give to another marketer when looking at a CMS? What's it need to do minimally and ideally?
Sure. I think the first thing is, again, always tying your MarTech stuck back to your strategy. What is it you fundamentally need to do? Are you trying to build engagement, build brand, build pipeline, right? So really important. Second, are you able to really personalize that experience for everyone coming? We all know that that's the nirvana of what we're trying to do, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but AI helps drive that quite a bit more. Third is it scalable and composable? Meaning, can you connect it to all of those other pieces that are so important in the MarTech stack? And will it scale with you? Can you go to multi sites, right? As opposed to individual sites. So it's everything from, hey, tying it to your strategy, understanding what you're trying to accomplish, making sure that it's scalable, making sure it has the latest technology in it, right? So if AI is important to you, and I believe it should be for everyone, does it have that capability or AI embedded in it in a safe and secure way?
Okay. So when you said from a strategy, do we want engagement? Yes. Do we want brand building? Yes. Do we want pipeline? Yes. I felt like at that moment it was all three. I can't think of a marketer in our community that wouldn't want all three of those. So
Mhm,
fine, we got to be able to do all of those with the
mhm.
website. Personalization is really an interesting, and we're at an interesting moment in time. So I want to go there for a second because
Oh,
there's and there's this dance that we're talking about where it's like, hey, it's Kathie. She's arrived on CMOHuddles.com. How do I deliver like an extraordinary personalized experience? Because she's part of our community. We know where a lot of data on her. And then there's, hey, possibly anonymized person. I'm not sure who you are who comes to the website. What's state of the art for personalization in your mind right now, that specifically CMOs should be thinking about or setting as a goal?
yeah, I think it's the ability to constantly test and improve all along the way, right? And making sure, like, interesting, you said, am I using Sitecore? Absolutely, I'm using Sitecore. But when I joined Sitecore, Drew, actually right away we migrated to all of the latest technology, right? Because we were on the on-prem solutions, we moved to the SaaS solutions. And one of the things we made sure that we did is that the data access was both accessible and leverageable in our solutions, right? Because personalization is only as good as the data that you can bring in, right? So ensuring you have that CDP that's connected in the right way to your website and you have the personalization capability in order to do all of the testing and constantly improve it as you go. So,
Let's
yes,
just
there are all different levels of personalization.
right. And it's sort of remarkable. I've talked to a number of experts in this area, and not everybody has a CDP. Can you just explain what a CDP is and why it's so important for a company like yours?
Sure. Yeah. So CDP is a customer data platform, and we use it where we store. It's our primary source of our customer information that we use within our website. So we're pulling in all of that information right through our website so that when people are returning back to our site, we're leveraging all of that knowledge. Every individual, each of us have an expectation that our vendors, the sites that we visit, that if we've been there before, that they know a little bit about us. And that's what we're permitted to do, leveraging a CDP.
Right. And again, we get back to generative AI and uses of generative AI.
Mhm.
Without this data, you have no hope
Yeah.
of taking advantage. I mean, it is as simple as that. Good data, great data. And I shared this recently, and it's so funny because at one point in time, I spent working at a direct marketing agency. And the business model was pretty simple. 60% was the list, 30% was the offer, and 10% was the creative. In terms of the effectiveness overall, bad list, forget it.
Yes.
So CDPs are the way, but there's still,
Can I? Oh,
please
sorry.
jump in.
I want
Sure.
to connect one other thing. The other thing that's really important is that housing of your data, right, in your digital asset management system. Because what you're doing is you're pulling through the right content to the individual. So it's really that interconnectedness between your CMS, your CMP, your DAM, right, as well as your DAM and your CMS, right? All of those pieces all together is when magic happens, and that's when you can really help make personalization come to life. And with the ability of AI, right, which is embedded in all of our offerings from brand aware AI through co-pilots and workflows, right? Then you are able to do that in a more seamless and connected and cost-effective way.
Okay, so just to make sure, I'm going to clarify this, and I may state it wrong, but so we have content over here, which could be anything from product content to content about it. And you're at the Amazon website, and hey, it's Drew, and you've shopped before, and I know what size shoe you wear. So I have content that might be able to be of interest to you about the shoe. I have data about past purchases. And of course, I have CMS, which is basically able to bring the two together so that we can have this profoundly personal experience. So,
yeah, correct.
I mean,
and you have the CMP, which is managing that whole flow of all of your content.
The CMP, which stands for
Content
Management
Platform.
Right. Okay. And there are certain just assumptions or connected dots based on past behavior. It gets trickier when it's the new person. Right.
Right. I mean, you do have some off-site behavior perhaps that could come in, or you have behaviors around where they went on your current website already, right? And then serving up content based on what they've already visited.
Right. So assuming they've been there before, you should have some knowledge that you've been able to store, assuming you they didn't remove all the cookies and all that good stuff. Right.
Exactly.
So they gave you permission to track and then so forth. You can do it in a way that is both effective, but not creepy, which is kind of
there you go.
The tricky part of all of this stuff,
Effective, but not creepy. That's
effective,
perfect,
but not creepy. All right.
Yeah.
Well, with that, thank you for that. That was a great overview. We're going to come back to you, but I want to bring on Kris Salazar, who is the VP of Marketing at Appcast, who is joining us this show for the first time. Hello, Kris, and welcome.
Hey, Drew.
So, how are you and where are you today?
I am doing great. It's a Friday, can't complain. I'm located outside of the Washington, D.C. area. So,
all right. We've got San Francisco Bay Area. We've got New York City. We have got Washington, D.C. We are covering all of the important places in the world right now. Talk to me about your overall strategy for ensuring that your MarTech stack is, aligned with the business.
Yeah, this sounds great. Kathie brought up some wonderful points there that I think some of us you'll probably be reiterated. When I think about, answering this question, I first think about having knowledge and deep understanding of what the current MarTech stack is, which I think Kathie also mentioned. When I think about that in more depth, it's why do we use these tools? How much are these tools costing us? Who uses it inside the team? Is it also a tool that other parts of the organization outside of marketing use? For example, do the SDRs use it? Do the Salesforce account teams use it? Do they like it? I think opinion matters because sometimes we buy tools and we think it's great for marketing and it's a useful case for teams that we will work with, and they may not like it. And getting that raw feedback is actually helpful from the team that's actually using it in the marketing team. Do we like the tools? Do we still feel like it's the right tool for us for what we need to do on a day-to-day basis? And then also know the issues. Every tool has a pitfall, or pitfalls plural. You need to have an understanding of what those are, because you can oftentimes spend too much time finding a replacement for that pitfall, and there's no replacement for those pitfalls. And just knowing the ins and outs of your MarTech stack are helpful. And And then
So
the second
let
thing
me,
I'm going to add there, if I can
okay,
just
go ahead.
quickly, is also knowing the ecosystem outside of the MarTech system. So what do the sales teams use for their tech stack? What does the business operation team use for tech stack? Because some of it already exists. Kathie brought up a great point about duplicative processes and tools, and there could be things that you could borrow from those teams, and so that you don't have repetitive use cases of tools.
So what you described sounded like a classic sort of MarTech audit. And I'm just curious in terms of how often, do you actually do that exercise in terms of auditing? Because you talked about, just basically going through every tool, doing an ROI analysis of that tool, who's using it, a user analysis. How often do you do an audit?
So my perspective is at least once a year, and the strategy around that is also around not locking ourselves into multi-year contracts with tools. As we all know, especially with the dynamic business environment, macro environment, your goals will change year over year. You don't want to be stuck with a 3-5 year contract. So for me, I force ourselves to have 1 year contracts. Always figure out, is that still the right tool? Is that still the right tool? Especially with the evolution of AI tools. Um, Other vendors are keeping up pace. Some vendors are staying still, and staying flexible is important in terms of your MarTech stack. A lot of times that deals with contracts, unfortunately.
No, and it's really smart. I mean, I think a lot of the MarTech brands try to get you to do a 2 or 3 year by offering you a special discount because they know that the longer the contract, the more likely you are to stay. But to the extent that you can limit these to 1 year and you're not locked in, another thing I've noticed, and this is is the cost of ownership of a piece of software is a lot higher than the software itself. Right? In the sense that you've got a lot of people that need to use this tool, and some tools, a lot of people like Salesforce, if that's, what you're using as your CRM, sales is using it obviously every day in theory, and marketing is using it all the time. Not an issue, but there are other ones that you add that add like a nice to have piece of data. One person is using it and they're barely taking advantage of it. So I'm wondering, as part of the audit, do you sort of look at how much of that particular application are we actually taking advantage of?
Absolutely. I think there's 2 components I think I'll answer for that. Is one is the staffing part. Each of these tools are not automated machines that you just leave. You need people that are actually know how to manage these tools. And part of that is understanding, do they have the bandwidth to manage these tools, right? So sometimes we over purchase tools, and then we have this kind of Batman problem where we have a tool belt of all this stuff and you only use like 2 or 3 things out of the 10. So I think that's a component of it, is making sure you have the right team and right knowledge to manage all these tools. The second part of it is around the usage and features, making sure you're actually using what you bought. And if you have a chance to, once again, review like the renewal period or renew tools, just buy what you need. Don't buy all the bells and whistles, because oftentimes the use case will trump all the features, right? Like you get 100 features and only use 5, and you may have paid for 100. And
yeah, and it would be nice if you could just strip some of them out early on in the process. So first I have to ask, can you explain the Batman problem again? I missed the metaphor.
Yeah, for all those, I like comics. Batman has a tool belt. He has a bunch of stuff in there. He'll throw a bunch of stuff and use it if you ever watch comics. And maybe he'll use one thing, which is his little grappling hook. And that's my analogy, is that don't carry too much. Only carry what you need.
But you never know what that emergency might be. I just might need the whatever it is, the I don't know what else he has on his tool bag, but the spray that he used sometimes. Anyway, okay, good to know. It's about the tool belt not having too much on it. This is a uncomfortable question at the moment, but a lot of brands have gone through staffing cuts in the last 12 months, and that crosses over to marketing automation. And suddenly the person who was responsible for or had the most knowledge of it is no longer with the company. They leave, and suddenly you're vulnerable. How have you sort of managed that, or how would you recommend folks manage against this challenge of, we have this technology but we don't have anybody who knows how to use it now?
And it's a great scenario to talk through because it's very common, and I've experienced this already myself. I think first and foremost goes back to our original point about understanding, is this a core tool? Do we really need this? So that's first part. Second is, who in the team has the knowledge, and who in the team has interest in getting the knowledge so you can upskill them. I think that's a critical component. And then who has bandwidth, right, to actually take this on? Is there stuff that these folks are not, are these things that they are doing that maybe it's not as priority? It's figuring out that staffing component of, and it's part skill, part time, and then part interest.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, I think I remember in one of these shows we talked about a MarTech audit, and the champion had to present the tool to the group and say how it's being used and why. And if a tool doesn't have a champion, there's probably an issue, which I thought was it's a great perspective on it. And so if you happen to get rid of the champion of that tool, well, make sure on the exit interview you know what those are linked to. I'm curious if you can share a recent win or lesson learned from a MarTech investment that you added or dropped.
Yeah. So a lot of the vendors I use, and goes back to my earlier point about the, providing feedback. Do the same thing with our MarTech providers. We push them to improve the product. So I join all the monthly calls for our MarTech providers. I give them my raw feedback, what I'm hearing. I push them. I think that's one thing that you want to do as a leader, is push them for improvements. If you know the roadmap that they're trying to build out, push them and say, that doesn't help solve my business problems. Provide real recommendations so that they can bring it back to their product team and build something for you. And I've seen that in multiple instances where even in the past year, I've pushed the vendors to improve these certain aspects, and they've done it, even though it's not on the roadmap. Like, develop your roadmap and just say, you know what, this is what we really need. And I'm pretty sure this is going to help solve most or all the customers' problems.
It's and so now, all right, and I'll save that one actually. So okay, so we've got, and by the way, I'm amazed that you're talking about vendors who have multiple, maybe hundreds or thousands of customers, and you raise your hand and say, hey, we could really use this, and they actually bring it back to you. That's kind of phenomenal.
It's part of understanding the roadmap, and I bring that up because it's important, because a lot of vendors will build stuff, and they may build stuff that the customers won't even use.
Right.
And if you acutely know their product in and out, you can provide really valuable feedback. And then part of the feedback, though, is you need to quantify, like, why this is helpful. Will this help me solve these problems? And is this probably, based on what you know about their customer base, would this be applicable to not just me? Because they're not going to solve,
Right.
like one little product feature just for you, but if you think it's going to help solve it for the greater good, sort of the customer base, then they'll listen.
Interesting. So are you MarTech vendors out there who are doing this? When you get that random request, it may in fact not be a random request. It may be a request that is actually 30, 40, 50% of your customers are in there. And even though your tech lead thought we should be going here, maybe sometimes it pays to listen to the customers. I will tell one famous story where Dell Computer polled all its customers. They all said, we want a Linux laptop. And so they said, okay, fine, here's a Linux laptop. Nobody bought it. So you as a MarTech vendor, I suppose you do have to be careful about what you decide to add. All right. With that, we're going to take a quick break. It's time for me to talk about CMO Huddles. We launched in 2020. CMO Huddles is the only community of flocking awesome B2B marketing leaders, and that has a logo featuring penguins. Wait, what? Yes. Well, a group of these curious, adaptable, and problem-solving birds is called a huddle. And the leaders in CMO Huddles are all that and more, huddling together to conquer the toughest job in the C-suite. C-suite, there's a little pun there, but it is a tough job. And I think everybody who has that job knows how hard it is. And it is hard to go it alone. So Kathie, Kris, you're incredibly busy marketing leaders. I'm wondering if you could share a specific example of how CMO Huddles has helped you. Oh,
Sure.
Kathie, why don't you start?
Okay, great. This is actually a fairly recent example. I've been part of CMO Huddles now for years, Drew, and I think it was just a few months back. I called you and said, "Help me! We're talking about changing our attribution model. Can you connect me with some folks who have done it recently?" And you connected me with a few folks. I got on the phone with them, and I was able to just get real time information. One person I had talked with before, and the others I'd never spoken with before. So it was so great to build new connections. So thank you for that, Drew.
I
And that's
love it.
one of
No,
the
in
best.
that story, I remember it in the moment, and I was so happy that folks responded, and it feels like there was a happy ending in that moment, in the sense that you were able to use some of the data that you got to
Absolutely.
negotiate. That's awesome. I love it. And Kris, you're relatively new to CMO Huddle, so hopefully we've delivered some value in one way or another to you.
Tons of value, actually. I have two specific examples. One is, we have a Slack thread. I generally ask for recommendations or feedback on, hey, has anyone checked this out or that out? And it's been a really engaging community. And the second example is that when I posted one of those, I actually ended up connecting with one of the huddlers on a one-on-one conversation, and we got really detailed feedback on how they were using that product, did they like it or not, and it helped make a decision for us in using that product.
I love it. And the key thing here is in both of these cases, these wonderful people actually ask for help. And so, but because you have to ask, and our business plan, just so you know, is 2 words: help huddlers. So if you happen to be a CMO in the community, just remember you can always ask for help. Send up the bat signal. We'll see it. If you're a B2B marketer who wants to build a stronger network, gain recognition as a thought leader, and get your very own stress penguin, please join us at cmohuddles.com. Okay. All right. Here's a tough one. I said at the top of the hour, I love generative AI tools. I've got 10 of them on my front of my phone. How do you avoid bright, shiny object syndrome when it comes to evaluating these new tools? And I'll let Kris, you start.
Yeah, I think going back to the main objective, like, is this going to solve a problem? And I always think with addition or subtraction, like, is it going to add something in terms of new insights? Is this going to increase my pipeline volume, exposure, awareness? And then when I think subtraction, is it going to reduce the manual processes? Is it going to reduce time-consuming tasks? Save the team time? It's got to do one or the other. If you can do both, that's great. But it has to lead back to the initial set of conversations, which ties back to goals.
There it is. All right. Kathie?
Yeah, I really struggled with this question, Drew, which is interesting. But I'll tell you why. Obviously, AI is really disruptive for marketing and for many organizations. And I started an initiative with my team that I called Project 30, which was that everybody in my organization had to improve pipeline, reduce costs, or improve efficiency by 30%. And you can't give that challenge without also giving the permission to test new things. But I think the key is to test them, see if they work, and if they don't continue to engage. So I do want the testing to be part of it, but then I want to only what I call nest the technology that really is tied to our strategy, tied to that ROI that we want to achieve, and only include those pieces. So test, but don't be 100% distracted by
Right.
it.
And I think there's a big difference between buying every tool you see and trying every tool that you see. And I think that you are definitely describing a try before you buy. And the other part of this, and I think both of you sort of spoke to it, is it's not just that it helps you do this one thing, it's possible, which in theory will save you time or money or, make you more efficient or more effective. And so it's a multi-dimensional evaluation. It's not just that new feature,
Right?
Which is really important. And so let's talk about this, because I'm seeing this a lot, and particularly right now, we're obviously in a period of uncertainty economically. Everybody's tech stack is being scrutinized. And there have always been platforms that have lots of products, some of which are not quite as good as others, best of breed versus platforms. And I'm wondering, is this the moment where people are sort of going to lean into platforms and lean away from sort of the tools, the best in the best of breed, just because of, just ease from a procurement standpoint, perhaps ease because we've got it already and maybe it's not 100% as good, but it's good enough. And there's other sides. So where are you thinking about platform versus best of breed? Go for it, Kathie.
Okay, sure. It goes back to, for me, what I stated at the beginning, right? What is core to our strategy that we're trying to accomplish? And those might be more platform oriented, best of breed. But then there are other pieces that you're just trying to do a tactical piece of your connection with, and that might be less strategic. That might not be need to be connected to your CMS, need to be connected to your CRM, right? So I really think it's the balancing act of what are those core pieces of technology that are core to your strategy, and then those that are less core might be the ones that don't have to be best of breed.
Interesting. What do you think, Kris?
I totally agree with Kathie's points. It goes back to what's most important, and sometimes the smaller ancillary tools for that use case is helpful. And like you said, Drew, it's a multifaceted type of approach. You also have to determine cost, time of using that tool. Sometimes, buying $1,000 product can help you save 50 hours. Like, that's worth it, even though it's not connected to the rest of our beautiful ecosystem, so to speak.
So I hopped over a question I want to go back to, which is, these tools are only as good as the people that use them. And, Kris, you talked a little bit about, do they like using it and so forth. It is rare in the world of software. And you can even look at it from just Microsoft Word. Like, you don't use all the features in Microsoft Word so how do you look at this from a usage standpoint and track it to sort of say, we've got this tool and 2 people are using it, but everybody else isn't, or whatever? How do you sort of think through that on the utilization of software challenge? Kris?
Yeah, sure. First, what I go back to my point earlier about gathering feedback from the teams, and you can kind of do this in multiple ways. Generally, what I see work is you ask the whole group that uses it, you send out surveys, and then you also do the one-on-one outreach. Just talk to folks individually, because some folks would rather tell you the nitty-gritty, the good, bad, and then the ugly. Sometimes you need to really hear the ugly to figure out, like, does the ugly outweigh the good, or does the good outweigh the ugly?
Right.
So I think that helps. And then the second thing that comes to mind for me is just repetition. Like, keep telling folks the value of this. We bought this because of this. We want this because of that. And that tends to really help increase adoption and make sure people are aware that, like, we have this nice shiny car. I also do this tactic, which is, if you don't use this shiny car, I will return it to the dealership. So use it, or else it's going back to the dealership.
I want my Ferrari. Don't take it away. And I'm thinking of Kathie. It's funny in sort of content or asset management systems. There's a classic complaint that sales isn't using any of the content.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Heard that.
And you've heard that, right? And it could be that they don't like the content. It could be that they haven't actually looked on it. Like, we did that piece of content. They just asked for a new. No, it's there already. So how, as a CMO, do you think about this? I mean, look, you have so many things that you have to think about. This is yet another one, or maybe you delegate it to somebody else. But it feels important, because I'm going to get to this budget question really quickly. Yeah. But talk a little bit about your approach, and again, as a software person, you probably have insight into the usage of your own products and how deep people go.
Of course. Yeah, I'll share 2 things. First one I'll share, which is not my product technology stack specifically within what we sell, but you mentioned this earlier. have a champion for every technology piece that you have in your stack. But then secondly, one of the things that we were finding internally at Sitecore was that not everyone around the organization was using our social media advocacy tool. And so what we did is we started, and this was an idea that the head of social media came up with on my team, was every week we started a pause to post that the CEO sends out, so that everybody in the company has one particular post. It's being, highlighted by the CEO, and we're seeing that ramp tremendously both in tool usage and in posting. So I think there's something around creating an initiative like that, rallying together, that can make things happen. Specifically on content that you raised, we do use our own technology, and we do look at our asset library and the uses that sales is using. We also ask for feedback, right? I was having QBRs today and said to my team, like, have you asked the sales organization, is that the best way that they want to receive that competitive insight, for example? So just what Kris was saying, making sure we're going to the stakeholders and getting that feedback directly as well is also important.
And I would think if I were a software vendor, I would want to be providing utilization reports.
Absolutely.
Right. And the best of breed. And even if they're low, I would put that on a red side and get my AEs working on, we need a new training program for these things, or we need to bring them together right. I mean, but how many of the software companies where you're the buyer actually do that and pay attention to utilization?
We absolutely look at utilization. We look at it when we do our MarTech stack reviews. I have a particular form everybody has to submit on. That champion talks through utilization, not only numbers, but frequency. And then we just look at it overall in terms of, Kris, you alluded to this, right? We look at if somebody hasn't used a tool in a period of time, we're going to take that license away and see if they complain, right? Because it does, every license you get in most technology tools, you're paying per seat at some level. So if it's not being used, I'd rather reallocate it to someone who will use it.
Yeah, it's definitely it's got to be a use it or lose it in that scenario. And I know there are actually companies that sort of embed themselves in between all the softwares and all the employees so that they also look at utilization,
right.
and that probably pays for itself. I'm going to throw out something that so in my mind, I feel like what's happened in the last 10 years is that more dollars have gone to MarTech and the stack, and less dollars have actually gone into programs. And that number, in some cases, as high as 20%, probably again, depending on where you read, it's 15 to 17% of total marketing spend is going into MarTech. Now, some also get that number down because Salesforce is covered by something else, right? So there's some sort of, moving things around, and maybe we have to look at this as percent of marketing and sales budget. My point is this. I think marketers in general are spending too much on MarTech, because once that number gets above 10%, it creates less dollars for marketing, which is what we need to do. Is marketing, because technology in most cases is not marketing. So I'm curious, as I throw out this thing and said, wouldn't it be, if I were saying, how could I find more dollars? I would say, how much are you spending in your MarTech stack, and reduce it. I don't know if that would be your answer to this thing, but I'm curious, as I throw out that kind of harsh point of view, push back on me and say, no, you're wrong, Drew. That's a wrong number. It's a wrong goal. So help folks understand what they should be thinking about when it comes to MarTech as a percent of budget.
Do you want to go, Kris, or do you want me to go?
You can go, Kathie, and I can follow. Yeah.
Drew, I can't look at it in isolation without also looking at people, right? To me, it's those three legs together that are so important, right? The people, programs, and tech stack. I will tell you, the tech stack is absolutely one of the first things that, like my board, when I first joined, that I had to do a deep dive on the tech stack. My spend is actually a lot lower than industry standard, even inclusive of the products that we use that are our own. So I agree with you in the sense that you have to have enough program spend to make an impact in the business. Absolutely.
Okay. So Kris, do you have a rule of thumb, a number? Do you look at it that way?
10% I think is a fair number. I tend to go leaner as well in terms of the tools, because I do find that some of the tools are just overly blown up in terms of number of features, and you don't need to buy like the A1 type of product. Sometimes it's the B2 that actually solves the problem, going back to the problems and goals that you need. And generally I try to steer away from like buying the best thing, because generally those things include the 100 tools again that you're not going to use. You're just going to use the 5. So just being mindful of the use case, and you don't always need to buy the best thing.
Yeah. And I'm just going to throw out this. We haven't really used the term total cost of ownership, but there is a total cost of ownership with every software. And that's something that you have to keep in mind. And so Kathie, you brought up this notion of people, and there are tools that are more people intensive than others. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's funny because I think the promise of AI is, in theory, that it might remove some of this people intensive usage of the technology. And so that's a good place to transition. At this moment, are you seeing the impact of AI in terms of actually making it require less manpower for certain applications, certain uses? I don't think I phrased the question quite right, but Kris, I'll throw it at you. So, in theory, if generative AI is doing all its work, I'll be able to get more out of the technology that I have. And therefore, without as many people. I mean, a very simple example is, in theory, a great writer can get 5x the amount of content out the door than they could, pre-generative AI, for example.
Yeah, I'd say the tools are generally impactful in terms of time savings. That's how I see generative AI right now, and most of the AI tools. I also say that the AI tools right now are in its infancy, and when you dig deep into the use cases, is it really impactful? And a lot of times it's maybe saves you 5-10 minutes, and like maybe that's not enough to buy that product. But I do see in general that most tools are striving to reduce time, if anything else, just reduce time used.
Okay. I think we have an audience question, Kathie, which is sort of that I'll throw back to you. Although you didn't answer the AI question. Let's go ahead and answer that one.
I'd love to answer the AI question because, I'm old enough to have been around when the website first became a thing, and I built the very first website for a company that had been in business for 30 years. Like, this is a moment in time similar to that, that I think every marketer needs to be attuned to. I mentioned that I have this initiative in marketing called Project 30, and I'm in my QBRs, as I mentioned today, too. So everybody in their QBRs has to report out on how close are they to that 30% improvement in pipeline, decrease in costs, or improvement in efficiency. And it's incredible on the efficiency side, for sure. In addition, we also have AI-enabled tools that we build internally that we're leveraging. And so having that brand aware AI ingested right into everything you do makes a tremendous difference. So I think it is a complete game changer. The other thing I'll mention, Drew, I've been working with Lisa Adams, who I think you know, and I'm working with Microsoft, and I actually have designed an organization that's 2/3 human and 1/3 agents that we're building. And this will fundamentally change how marketing organizations function, how they're structured, how AI augments the capabilities for marketers to deliver things more efficiently and, at a lower cost, for sure.
Wow, that's exciting. Oh, I can't wait to hear about that. And it's funny, I just sent a note to Lisa saying, hey, join us again at the Super Huddle, because I suspect that may have been where you saw her or another time. And she's doing interesting things with digital twins, which is on my list of things I got to build. But so I have this question came in for you, Kathie, which is, what's the most common misconception you see marketers have about personalization today, especially in B2B?
I think the most common might be not knowing where to start, right? And recognizing that just start somewhere and then grow from there, right? Test and learn. And so I think the number one thing is that I get asked is, I don't know how to start. The misconception is I can't start. And I would highly recommend that you look at your technology stack, make sure you have the functionality to do it, the data connection to do it, as we talked about earlier, and then just start.
Right. So you can't start without data. So you have to have some data source. And so in theory, you could start with some data source and some executional area, which you could test. But as your data gets better and you fill out your data platform, in theory, the options of personalization are kind of unlimited.
Yeah.
Right. In some ways is very exciting. And then, what blows my mind is just trying to think about avoiding death by 1,000 pay for cuts, and how at the same time that you're doing all this personalization, there's still a layer of trust building and reputation building that sort of adds up to a whole, not just as a splintered idea. And that I have no idea how that works.
Yeah, and if I can just add one thing to that, Drew, and I think the team on my team who really drove this within my organization did an incredible job looking first at the data flow. The access and the flow is so important. So I would just recommend take a step back and not only look at the visualization of your MarTech stack overall, but look at your data flow and access to make sure that you structure it so that you can take advantage of it for personalization.
Okay, Kris, I'm going back to you with the AI question. Is there any part of this that you're excited about?
I'm actually very excited about it because I see that, back to my earlier point, I think we're just at the cusp of this, like, starting. And for me, this is where we have to keep pushing these vendors and saying, like, what is this going to help me solve? Tell me what's coming up, understand the roadmap, because this can help you make decisions that, like, maybe I'm going to renew with this vendor, or maybe I need to go find the other vendor to see which one's developing further. That's why I feel like this is an exciting time. Like Kathie said, it's super interesting right now. I think the use cases, as Kathie mentioned, the efficiency, the time savings, these are all core things happening right now. But I see the opportunity for impacting the other aspect of business, which is scaling growth. Like, when those tools can really help us do that, I think that's going to be wonderful.
Yeah, it's so interesting because there's so much AI washing right now. Right? Everybody's suddenly an AI first tool, right? And it's almost like you can't help it. And it's so problematic from a customer standpoint, because really last month we were talking about, content management system, and now we're talking about the AI future. So it's tricky. I admit it, and it's two-sided, because there is probably no way for both of you that you can't go to market without some AI infused aspect of your product, right? It's so that's got to be tricky. I'm just wondering how you think about that in terms of for other brands in MarTech in the space as they are infusing AI into it. What's the key here from a marketing to marketer standpoint? Because they'll see the smoke. Any thoughts on that, Kathie, in terms of how do you walk that line?
Well, I think I actually feel so fortunate to be marketing to marketers and to be working with a product team that, will take our input. So myself and people across my organization work hand in hand with the product team to give feedback, right? And input on what we would use and not use. So I'm hoping that what people see in our products and technology, is what they're really looking for and need, because we're bringing all of that customer feedback in.
I love it. All right. Well, we are now at the point where we're going to ask you for your final words of wisdom for other CMOs when it comes to managing and optimizing your MarTech stack. Kris, you are first. Final words of wisdom.
Yeah, thanks, Drew. Aligning your MarTech stack to your objectives. just know what you're using it for. To Kathie's point, know where the lead flow is, the data flow is, because if those pipes lead to a dead end, you probably have leaks in your MarTech stack, and then constantly evaluate your existing stack and what else is out there. Yeah, I think it's always important to stay ahead of the curve and making time to evaluate tools, even if you don't intend to purchase them. It is important to understand the landscape and the new tools that could be coming in, because maybe you don't need it now, but maybe 1 year from now you will.
You can never put your head in the sand. All right, Kathie, final words of wisdom.
Let's see, I agree with everything Kris said, so thank you for that, Kris. So I'll say what he said, but plus I'll add to that, make sure, and you mentioned this earlier, I'm a big believer of having a champion for each of your tools and making sure you're really carving out that time to do the evaluation. And one of the things I try to do is incorporate as much of my marketing team in that evaluation as possible, because it's a great opportunity to upskill your own organization to ensure that they understand what each tool does and doesn't do, and that they're also feeling empowered to bring suggestions or recommendations for tools that might fill the gaps you have.
Interesting. I love it. And part of that is it's just not here. It's like you're handed a laptop or you're handed a tool and but you are part of the process and decision group that decide, do we keep moving forward with this? And so you're really helping them grow as individuals. And I think this is going to be really important moving forward, because, I think everybody wants a license at their desk for a GPT. And CFOs are looking at that going, wait a second, 20 times 1,000 employees. I don't think so. And I don't want just ChatGPT. I want Claude 2 and maybe Perplexity. So now it's 60 person. And so you've got this massive thing. So it's going to be a really interesting moment for all this technology and so forth. But the one thing is clear. You can't do this role without a good stack, because you just can't track the information you need to justify your budget, to help actually move things through the pipeline. There's so many different areas, and I didn't really touch on any of that, which is the value that these things can bring. All right. Well, with that, thank you, Kathie, Kris. You're both great sports. And thank you, audience, for staying with us. Please join us in 2 weeks when we'll be talking about what CEOs need to know about marketing with Grant Johnson, Rebecca Stone, and Jan Deal. Cue the music.
CMO Huddles Studio is produced by Melissa Caffrey. Our production assistants are Laura Parkin and Ishar Cuevas. If you'd like to learn more about CMO Huddles, please visit CMOHuddles.com. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, and until next time, keep on sharing, caring, and daring each other to greatness.